my name is Bambi. I'm from Connecticut, and my story is about Alzheimer's. I guess you could say I'm an Alzheimer's survivor, if there's such a thing. My entire family is. It happened about 4 years ago to my mom. She died recently, but I'd like to take you through the journey with me. It was about June 2010, and my mom started forgetting things, which I guess is natural when you're in your 80s. But when you start finding keys inside the refrigerator and underwear in the mailbox, and you know she's not having an affair with the mailman, we joked about that. We knew something was wrong. We went to the doctor. We had some tests taken. Julia started forgetting a lot. She was even forgetting how to walk properly, and we noticed this, and we had to adjust. The family consisted of my dad, who was living with her, of course, at the time. They've been together 56 years. My husband and I, and we have 3 children. Our son, who was 20 at the time, decided, because he was a CNA and he was EMT trained, that he would actually move in downstairs. There was a basement apartment made by my husband and paid for by my father. And my son moved in there, gave up his full-time college to part-time to help out with the grandparents, which was a very nice gesture on his part. I don't think many children or many people would do that these days. And he went from full-time college to part-time to be there in case somebody fell or there was an issue. I, being the only daughter, went through the guilt. I'm Italian and Swedish, and the Italian guilt just came right in. The panic set in. I've learned a lot from this, but at the beginning, I'll be honest, I was angry. I was questioning, why me? Why my mother? Why the woman with the beautiful smile that helped everybody? She had lived through the Depression. She was married 56 years. They were so happy. Why did this happen? She was forgetting how to eat. Here's one example, and she didn't know how to use the fork. And my father would get upset and yell at her, and then I would yell at him, and then it would domino effect, it would snowball. But after a while, we learned to use humor, and I think that was the answer to everything. When she started doing things like that, we started laughing and joking with her, and we learned to adjust as a family. And even my daughter was 9 at the time, and it was very difficult to see Grandma go through this. The sad thing is, people don't understand. My daughter lost some friends because they didn't want to come over to the house we were staying at because we were watching Grandma when there wasn't school in session. They didn't like seeing her in the wheelchair, or she would actually, as gross as it sounds, that was my mother, she might wipe her nose like this and it might go into her hair, but she didn't know what she was doing, and people had to realize that. You have to redirect, you have to take care of her, wipe it for her, or give her something and gesture what to do. We lost friends and relatives as well, which was surprising. Relatives that would see her all the time, visit, take her out, they stopped coming over. They already had Julia as dead, as gone, and she was still there. There were times when she did have cognitive moments, and her smile was wonderful, and I was still learning a lot from her, and I couldn't understand that. One funny thing that did happen, after about a year, my daughter and I were getting in the car ready to visit Julia and Poppy Sal. That's what we call my father. We were going over to Julia and Poppy's house, and all of a sudden, when my daughter opened the car door, this little orange and white kitten just jumped on the car seat. So my daughter looked at me and said, "Oh, Ma, thank you." And that wasn't a plan. That wasn't from me. We did take the kitten over to Poppy's. I said, "What am I going to do?" Poppy said, "Julia, Mom never liked cats, so you better get rid of it." Well, I hate to put it that way, but that's exactly what he said. I love animals, but he said, "You better get rid of it." So what we did was we had the kitten on a chair. Julia was at the other chair at the kitchen table. Miraculously, Julia started talking to the kitten. The kitten just sat there and tilted its head and listened to her the whole time. Julia fell in love with the kitten. Julia had conversations daily with this kitten. My father let the kitten stay. The reason I'm crying is I'll get to it later, but when Julia did pass away, the kitten was laying on her at the foot of her bed. And when the people came to take Julia away when she was dead, the kitten went up like a lion on his hind legs like this and wouldn't let them near my mother. And it was just amazing to see this love and this bond from this kitten, this little angel that showed up when years ago my mother would have said, get that thing out of here. You could see how that kitten changed all our perspectives, and it became a part of the family, and it became a part of my mother's life. And like I said, the kitten was there when she died, staying at her feet. So we take that as a sign that was meant to be. We named him Winchester, by the way. So Winchester is now with Poppy. But getting back to Julia, let me regress a little bit. Julia would look at my father and say, "Ooh, he's old. I'm only 39. Who is that old man?" So we used to try to tell her it was her husband, and after a while we just went with it and said he was a friend of the family. But one night, after 56 years of marriage, Poppy actually had to sleep on the couch because he went to go to bed and Julia was already in bed. She yelled at him and said, "Get the hell out of my bed. Who are you? I'm going to tell my father I don't know you." So my father, rather than argue, just complied, went on the couch and slept on the couch that night, and it only happened once. Julia remembered her long-term memories better than her short-term memory. She would relive times she went to the store with her sister, and I would become her sister, and she would tell me what we did and what we saw, and it was like reliving her life through her eyes, through her mind, and it was wonderful. It was really great that I had that opportunity. It was sad about the situation with the Alzheimer's, but I saw my mom differently. I learned about her childhood. I learned more about the love for her parents. I learned when she learned that there wasn't a Santa Claus, when it was the Depression, and there was only one orange hanging in our stocking. And she was telling me, her sister's name is Dora, so she thought I was her sister, and she was telling me one day, "Dora, I feel so bad. You're my younger sister, and we have to realize there's no Santa because Papa put the orange in our stocking." But I relived all these moments with her, and they were very, very special. She got very, very sad when she would ask, "Where is Papa?" Her father, my grandfather, and my father, Poppy, would say, "Oh, he's dead." You don't just blurt that out to someone with Alzheimer's, but Poppy's very Italian old school, and that's the point, and that's what it is. So Julia would ask for her father, her Papa, and Poppy would say, "He's dead," or "He's dead, Jewel," or "He's in heaven," and she would cry for hours. And that was awful. So my daughter, who was in 10 at the time, came to this realization. She sat down and she wrote a letter. I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "You'll see." She gave the letter to me and I gave it to Julia. One of the last things to go, Julia was an avid reader. She was able to read. After a while, the words became jumbled, but she was able to read, and she flipped through magazines and the newspaper with Winchester the kitten. Well, my daughter Kendall had handed Julia a letter, and the letter said, "Dear Julia, your mom and I are in Italy. We love you very much. We had to take a trip to see the relatives. We'll see you soon." Well, Julia read that letter and she smiled and she was so happy. So every time she asked for her father, her Papa, we would hand her this letter that Kendall wrote, and it solved the whole problem. She was happy. She thought her father was having a good time, and she didn't have to relive her father's death. And that was important. The whole thing with Alzheimer's is keeping them happy and safe. We made the mistake once of all leaving the house one day, only for 15 minutes, but we all took off to the store and figured Julia would be fine in her now wheelchair in front of the couch. She hadn't gotten up by herself. She wasn't able to walk as far as we knew. Therapy wasn't working. My son came home first. Casey found Julia in the front yard, sitting down, crying. Casey picked her up. Somehow, this woman had gotten outside, went downstairs, tumbled down the side of the house, and was sitting on her butt in the driveway full of mud and grass. We were shocked. We were very happy she was fine, and we learned the hard way. You don't leave her alone for even a minute. And my son, when he picked her up, she had a moment and looked in his eyes and said, "You know what? I love you. You just saved my life." And we don't know where that came from either, because normally at that point her words were a bit garbled, even though she was able to read, and she sang a lot. We regressed into singing songs. We sang "Row, Row Your Boat." We sang Old MacDonald was the big song that she would sing. We sang children's songs. Some people told me that was babying my mother, and there was stuff such as age-appropriate things to do. Well, you know what? This is what made her happy at the time, so we sang. And yes, my mother colored, and I don't care if she colored in or outside of the lines. We sat there at the table and colored together, and she enjoyed it, and that's what was important. When I was young and I had problems, not big problems, but whenever any of us had problems or I felt bad or someone hurt me in school, she used to always say, just be Bambi, it'll be okay, just be you. So I adapted a new thing saying, just be Julia. So once in a while when Julia would say, gee, I don't know, I'd say, that's okay, Ma, just be Julia, just be Julia. Showering her got to be a big problem. Showering her and dressing her. My mom, who was always nice and smiling and did everything with me, started spitting at me, telling me to go to hell, and worse. It was very trying on me. My son, who moved in downstairs, Casey, was the CNA EMT trained. He did warn me from the beginning, I will never wash up Grandma, because that's Grandma. I don't want to see her private parts. I do that at work, that's a different story. I don't want to do that with my grandmother. Well, God stepped in, because one day I was showering Julia and she was spitting and yelling at me and I was crying hysterical, and my son heard me. He came in with his scrubs on because he had just come back from work, and he said, move aside, Mom, I got this one. I'm so proud of him. My son, how many kids would do that? My son actually took over washing his grandmother. Because he had the scrubs on, she took him as a doctor or an authority figure. She gave him the nickname of Dr. Jonathan, which was silly, but we don't know where it came from. So when it was time to shower, Dr. Jonathan put her in the tub, got the little shower hose thing, and she was fine. My husband also is a big fireman, and God bless him too, because when he was home, he works a lot, but when he was home, he would help Casey. So the men took over the shower situation. You would think the females would. For some reason, she worked better with them. She didn't like me doing it. She would get very upset, but when it was over, all you had to do was hug her, put on her jewelry, she would say thank you, she would smile, and certain things were very, very familiar. Her wedding ring, for example, she might not know who her husband was, but she would rub it and she would kiss it, and it meant love. And speaking of love, this was a tough thing. One day we were looking in the mirror. This was maybe after a couple phases of Alzheimer's. A couple years had gone by. And we're looking in the mirror together, and she just looked at me through the mirror and she says, you know what? I love you so much. And I said, I love you too. And then she started laughing, and I said, what's funny, Julia? Because she responded to Julia, not Mom. I said, what's funny, Julia? She goes, I love you, but I don't know who the hell you are. And then we both started laughing, but I realized something. The love was still there. That was still felt. And that's why I couldn't understand why other relatives and friends weren't coming over. She was still there. There was history there. We were learning a lot from her. And our family, I know I'm crying a lot. It's just I miss her. She just died a few months ago. Our family became a lot stronger. We had to. We had no choice. I am a therapeutic recreation director, so I should not be slobbering and sniveling like this. I've been doing it for 25 years. I've taken care of people in hospice. I've helped other people. I've dealt with families. I've seen them drop people off in nursing homes. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just done. I've had people say to me, well, you should know what it's like. You've dealt with this. Sympathy and empathy are two different things. When it happens to you, it's a whole new ball game. The emotions come into play. And excuse me, I know I work in nursing homes, but there was no way I was going to put my mother in one. We made that agreement years ago, joking around when I was younger. She took care of my diapers. I would take care of hers. And it wasn't a pretty sight, and it wasn't fun. In fact, trying to get her into the briefs is a whole other story. She had had a few accidents, so we went and bought those Depends or whatever they are, and we got a nice pretty pink color, and she wanted nothing to do with them. And my father saying, oh, it's all the fashion. You'll see them in the magazines. The models are wearing them. So we tried to do humor, and we tried to do a little psychology. Wouldn't work. Finally, I put one on over my shorts. I said, Ma, look, I like them. I'm wearing them. You should wear them. It's the new thing. She started wearing them no problem. Again, a lot of it was keeping her happy, the play on words, using the psychology, and that's what we had to do with her. It was very difficult the last year. She was failing. She would just sit there and talk like that. Once in a while, something would come out. She was still in there, but it wasn't the same. We knew we were losing her, and it was very, very difficult. We had to keep her in the wheelchair. We had to keep turning her. We had to keep bringing her. We couldn't take her out anymore. We used to take her to movies, the parks, amusement parks. We couldn't take her out of the house anymore. And it was around Christmas time. And I said, God, give me strength because I don't know what to do anymore. I was crying a lot. I was upset a lot. My father was getting exhausted. He's now turning 93, 94. You know, and this was a young 94 that was still going on upside down roller coasters. But this was wearing him out. This was the love of his life. He was watching her deteriorate. And I didn't know what to do as the only child. And my husband's always working and the kids are supportive. But I was the matriarch now. I was the one that had to handle everything. And Julia had a few seizures. We thought we were going to lose her those times, but she bounced right back. And we never took her to the hospital. We called the doctor. And we have a nice old Italian doctor. And he said, honestly, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know, she's old. What are you going to do? You're going to put her body through tests. She's going to scream. And that's how he talked. He was wonderful. But it's true. What are you going to do? At that age, do you want to probe someone's body? Do you want to put them through that pain, that fear? She had a lot of fear because she didn't know what was going on. You didn't want that. So she went through the seizures at home, and we had my husband, the paramedic fireman, monitoring her. My son, we were watching her. And then after a few of those, I didn't think I could take much more. And I said, God, what am I going to do? I need a sign. I don't know what to do anymore. We do have faith as a family. That's one thing that we do have and believe in. And that's our belief. I wouldn't put it on anybody else. But I thank God, and I believe that's how we got through all of this as a family. Julia was laying down one night, and it was after Christmas, and I laid beside her, and she was singing and humming Old MacDonald. And I said to her, Ma, I was stroking her head. I said, Ma, I need you right now. I said, Julia, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore. And I'm scared. And all of a sudden, she was just laying there singing and moving her hands like that. She stopped and she stared at me. And it was really, really eerie. And I felt like maybe I fell asleep and dreamed this. She stared at me. Her words were very clear. She looked right into my eyes. She looked right into my eyes, and she grabbed my hand, and she said, honey, do what you have to do. You know what you have to do. It'll be okay. Just be you. And then she just went back down, laying in bed, doing this with her hands like it never happened. I don't know if those were her words. I don't know if it was my imagination. But in the next couple of weeks, things changed for me. I became very brave. I became very tough. I think I became a little hard. But I think you needed to at that point. I realized things had to be done. I sat down and I wrote her obituary. But I wrote mine too. I wrote it more as an honor or a privilege, not to be morbid and not to sit there and think about it. I actually made a phone call to the funeral homes. I called a crematorium because that's what she wanted. We talked about that. I got out a book and I started writing down the finances and everything. All of a sudden, it was just something I did. The ball started rolling, and I just got into this mode where things have to be done. Sure, I would cry like I've been doing on and off. You get emotional. But I did it. I didn't ask for help. I didn't ask for suggestions. I just did it. When everything was done, I was able to take a breath. I told my father what I had done. He said, that's good, but this can last another 3 years, whatever. Less than 3 weeks later, Julia died. My husband and my sons were away. I was there, my daughter was there, my father was there, and Winchester was there, up like this, making sure nobody else got near her body. We dressed her at home in the dress that I found. I also found that weeks before. I went through her closet, and I found the dress that she wore at my wedding 26 years ago. She still fit in it. I put that dress on her. My daughter and I did her nails. She was in bed when she passed. We fixed her hair. We put lipstick on. We fixed her better than any funeral home could have fixed her up. And she looked beautiful, so beautiful that my father started crying, and he said that's how he remembered her, and that's how he wanted to remember her. So Julia passed with the cat by her side, with her family by her side, and that's how she would have wanted to go. She left us behind, but she left a lot of good memories. She taught me a lot. Talking about it now, of course, I'm crying because this is sort of like a video diary, but I have become a better person. I understand more. At work, somebody was dying a few weeks ago, and I asked to sit with them. I normally don't do that. It's just if I'm there, I'm there. If I'm not, I'm not. I asked to sit with them, and I think people need that. You need someone to be there for the transition. You need people to love you and support you. That could be any of us. The people that are afraid of Alzheimer's, I gotta say to you, you shouldn't fear it because the person is still deep in there. I mean, yes, sometimes rather than a doctor, I think she needed a priest for an exorcism because the things that came out of her mouth never would have come out of that woman's mouth. But she didn't know any better, and it has to do with the brain. And it could affect any of us at any time. So we need to understand, we need to research, and we basically have to learn to help people. We never know why or how Julia got this. You know, there's still studies being done on it. We don't know if that means anyone else in the family will get Alzheimer's. Maybe that's what some of the relatives were afraid of. But I hope they could learn from our strength and how we dealt with it, that you need the humor, you need the love of the family, and you need faith. And if anyone else is dealing with it now, you know, I would gladly talk to them. I would gladly help them because now I understand. It's more of an empathy than a sympathy. So I guess that story is my story about Julia. I love her very much, and I hope she's in heaven looking down at me, and I miss her. So I could say to her, just be Julia, and I'll just be Bambi.